They told me this will fix my aquarium, but it didn't. If you've been in this hobby long enough, you know there's a lot of advice that sounds great until you actually try it. And I've tried plenty of those guaranteed fixes myself. Some worked, some backfired, and others were just unnecessary. So today, I want to share a few things I learned the hard way in hope that you don't waste time, money, or plans like I did. This one takes me back to the second aquascape I ever built, which turned into a complete algae nightmare. Back then, I was still new to this hobby, so I was desperately searching for anything that would help me get that algae under control. And that's when I came across this tip from a pretty big channel. You should have one algae eater for every single gallon of water. If you're not a beginner, you already know how crazy that sounds. But I was a beginner, and I thought I had finally found the magic solution. So what did I do? I went out and bought a whole bunch of algae eaters. A lot. I'll be honest, that tank barely had any algae eaters before. So the new crew actually did an amazing job at first. Within a couple of weeks, the tank looked completely different. Super clean, spotless, like nothing ever happened. However, what do you think happens when you put enough algae eaters in an aquarium to wipe out a full algae bloom in just a couple of weeks? What happens is simple. They run out of food in a couple of weeks. Luckily, I had another aquarium running at the same time, so I was able to move them around before things got ugly. But if I hadn't had that second aquarium, that could have ended really badly. One algae eater per gallon is way too much. It's not sustainable, and it creates more problems than it solves. If your aquarium is healthy, 1 or 2 algae eaters per 10 gallons is usually plenty. And when I say algae eaters, I'm talking about the small guys, Amanotrim, Orosinclus, not huge plecos or anything like that. The real fix for algae isn't to overload the tank with cleanup crews, it's to figure out why the algae is there in the first place. I've always kept skimmers on my aquariums because they do a good job at removing surface oil, but they clog fast, and if you don't clean them often, they pretty much stop working. They can also pull in small shrimp or tiny fish, which makes them a little risky to run at all times. And to be honest, I wasn't maintaining them the way I was supposed to, so they were just sitting there, running for no reason. That's when I decided to turn them off completely and see what happened. And what I noticed surprised me. Some days, the surface stayed perfectly clean, even without the skimmer. So I started paying attention to when the oil appeared and when it disappeared. I realized the heaviest surface oil almost always showed up right after water changes. But as the days went by after the water change, the oily film slowly disappeared on its own. That didn't make sense at first, so I kept washing the tank until I found the reason. As the water evaporates, the water level drops closer to the lily pipe. And once it gets close enough, the outflow creates a ripple that naturally breaks up the surface film. That ripple alone was doing the same job the skimmer was supposed to do. So now, I don't fill my tanks all the way up after water changes. I leave the water level about an inch above the lily pipe so the ripple stays strong or weak. And ever since I started doing that, I haven't needed a skimmer at all. No clogs, no maintenance, no shrimp getting sucked in, just clean surface water from simple surface movement. If you guys are enjoying the video, remember to like and subscribe. It helps the channel grow and get to more people who love this hobby. Stop testing your aquarium water. I've heard that advice so many times, and I understand where it comes from. You really don't need to sit there testing your water every week, chasing perfect numbers that don't actually exist. If you understand the basics of keeping healthy plants and healthy fish, testing becomes something you almost never need to do. But here's the part people forget to mention. You still need to own a reliable test kit. Problems do happen, even in well-maintained tanks. And when something feels off, those test kits can be the difference between saving your aquarium or losing it. I'm not saying this as theory. This happened to me not too long ago. I had cycling issues in one of my tanks, and I would have never caught it without testing. Everything looked normal, nothing seemed wrong, but the bacteria colony wasn't stable, and only the test kit revealed what was actually happening. That's why my approach now is pretty simple. Don't test constantly, don't test obsessively, and don't panic over every little number, but do test when something changes. Maybe your plants look off, maybe your fish are acting different, maybe the water looks a little cloudy. That's when the test kit matters. Think of testing as a tool for confirmation, not something you rely on every single week. I don't wait until disaster hits, but I also don't waste time testing when everything is clearly running smoothly. Once a month is usually enough just to make sure everything is on track. The rest of the time, focus on the fundamentals, because if those are solid, your parameters will almost always fall into place on their own. I'm going to tell you something really not smart that I did a long time ago, and please learn from me on this one. I was dealing with a pretty bad algae problem, so I removed enough water from the aquarium until the most affected areas were sticking out above the surface. Then I grabbed a little container, filled it with an anti-algae product, dipped a small brush in it, and started applying it directly onto the plants. Yes, directly on the plants. Within a couple of days, every plant that was treated that way started melting. I lost so many plants, and it honestly scared me because I didn't understand what went wrong. In my head, it didn't make sense to use a brush underwater. By the time the brush reached the algae, I thought the product would be completely diluted anyway. So applying it out of the water felt logical, and it was the worst possible decision. Eventually, I found out that anti-algae products are not supposed to be used that way. The correct method is actually really simple. Turn off your filter, brush or use a syringe to apply the product underwater, wait a couple of minutes, and then turn the filter back on. These products are way too strong to be used on exposed plants. Out of the water, they can absolutely destroy them. This was many years ago, and I don't use anti-algae products anymore at all. I don't think they are a great long-term solution, and most things don't need them if the basics are right. But if you ever decide to use one, at least avoid the mistake I made. Don't apply it the way I did. A lot of people will tell you to lower your light intensity when you get algae. And honestly, I used to believe that too. It sounds like a reasonable solution, right? Less light should mean less algae. But the more experience I've gained, the more I've realized that light intensity is rarely the real problem. I've run very strong lights over many of my tanks, lights that most hobbyists will instantly blame for algae. Yet, those tanks stay completely algae-free. And the reason is simple. If the basics are in place, the light is not the enemy. When your plants have good nutrition, they outcompete algae effortlessly. When your filtration is strong and stable, you won't see nutrient spikes that trigger algae blooms. And when you have a proper scavenger and algae-eating crew cleaning up leftover food and organic waste, the system stays balanced on its own. In a healthy aquarium, you can run bright lighting without issues because everything else supports the system. Strong lighting only becomes a problem when something else is already out of balance, like poor water parameters, low plant mass, unstable CO2, or excess debris. So instead of blaming the light right away, take a step back and look at the foundation of the tank. If the foundations are in good shape, the light intensity stops being a threat and actually becomes a tool, one that gives you better color, stronger growth, and a healthier planter aquarium overall. So don't rush to dim your lights every time algae shows up. Fix the basics first, and the algae usually disappears on its own. If you've tried any of these things before, don't worry, we've all been there. Drop a comment below and tell me what you stopped doing in your aquarium that made everything easier.